Here I am in Taiwan, a place sometimes known as Technology Island. It's famous for producing semiconductors, but now it's using technology to disrupt a completely different kind of industry, one we often don't link to computers: democracy itself.
The disruption began with the 2014 Sunflower Revolution, when citizens stormed the Legislative Yuan, or Parliament, after trade law was brought in. Like Brexit in Britain, it split the country in half, not least because many thought it brought Taiwan too close to China, but mostly because they felt their views, their fears, were ignored by those in power. Amongst the crowd was a new kind of protester called civic hackers. As well as marches and banners, civic hackers used the power of computers and data. They've come up with new ways of making decisions and astonishingly got the government on side, who asked them for help so they could listen better too. One of the people in the crowd that night was civic hacker Audrey Tang.
Was there the night before they burst in?
Yeah.
When they're just about to burst in, and I was there to provide the internet connectivity.
Having recently returned from a high-flying career in Silicon Valley, she turned from technologist to politician. Describing herself as a conservative anarchist, Audrey became the youngest member of Taiwan's cabinet and the world's first transgender minister. She and her colleagues became the champion of a new transparent process of decision-making. It was called V, or Virtual Taiwan, and its first big job was to get people talking. And its first big test was literally on the roads of Taiwan itself. It all started with Uber, just like the one that I'm in here now. The company moved in, it was trying to get more of a share in Taiwan. But like in so many other places around the world, it was disruptive. It was disrupting laws and regulations, and no one knew what to do. Well, then a new digital platform was used, and a deadlock that had long existed was broken. Central to the vTaiwan process was a platform called Pol.is that originated in Seattle. When the question of Uber arose 3 years ago, citizens and drivers and industry reps from across the divide were all invited to join that single online space and submit their views. Pol.is would then bunch them up into clusters of similar attitudes.
So what is this amazing digital solution? Well, first it allowed you to see just what cluster you were in yourself. But then, and this is what made it so different from other digital platforms, rather than surfacing what divided each of the clusters, it gamified everyone trying to find what they actually had in common instead.
The game here is to win consensus, not majorities. Pol.is works to unearth what almost everyone has in common, not just the 52%.
So I log on to Pol.is, I join the debate, and I can respond to the statements of others and then eventually draft my own.
But my statement has to win support from all sides of the argument, not just my own, so I have to rewrite it.
But if I keep drafting the same entrenched message over and over, I won't be heard. I might as well not be there.
It's only when I've refined my message enough to reach across the whole debate that Pol.is allows me to be heard. Meanwhile, the site sifts through all the statements as they were added and redrafted to work out common ground. And as the discussion changes, so do people's avatars to reflect their new relative position within the debate.
After a handful of weeks, the most consensual statements emerge, and having garnered support from across the whole of the debate, they might not look like anything that was said at its beginning. But now, because they're consensual, they can be turned into regulations and laws.
It certainly settled the Uber question 3 years ago. But now vTaiwan is tackling a hot new topic: e-scooters on the roads.
It's strange to think, but these are exactly the kind of things which actually disrupt democracy. They come out of nowhere, they disrupt all the laws and regulations which exist, and if the law can't adapt quickly enough itself, then actually it quickly becomes more and more irrelevant.
Whether e-scooters should be allowed on public roads and walkways has been dragging on for about 5 years, almost as long indeed as it's taking me to stand up straight on one. But these guys have no such problem. They are keen riders and they want change.
Is this kind of giving you a route to deal with this kind of question and be involved in a way that actually the normal ways in which we do democracy just isn't?
Makes things all go easier. Because you use the Facebook every day.
Are you ready to kind of listen to maybe people that don't think that e-vehicle should be made legal and maybe find a third way?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Totally open. Totally open.
That's why you're here?
Yeah, that's why you're here.
Yeah.
I'm back with Audrey to ask a bit more about why vTaiwan is so successful.
It's the people who knows more about what to do when there is an emergent technology, when there is an emergent social issue. It shows both the division and the consensus, but much more importantly, it always shows that the consensus outweighs the division. If you have a reply button, then people over-focus on the earlier, more polarizing topics. But because there's no reply button, there's no way for troll to grow.
So far, vTaiwan has been used to set the agenda for some 20 laws and regulations. And from now on, at least some elements of it will be used for all future legislation too. But it will be interesting to see whether it will ever be used for highly sensitive, significant, divisive issues. I am not convinced politicians are ready to give up this much power just yet.
We still have so-called digital gap in our society, which means some elder people or some people in other places don't use digital tools very much. So that's why I think we still have some function to collect opinions from different groups.
But for digitally savvy groups at least, it found that previously distant views actually had much in common with each other regarding both taxi safety and rider convenience. Uber was allowed to operate in Taiwan under certain conditions while relaxing laws on taxis so they could operate in a more Uber-like way. And as for e-scooters, people expressed fears about safety and whether the roads could cope, but all the divergent attitudes and indeed oppositions soon boiled down to two main groups. Through the platform, the next agreed step was to launch a pilot site. And that's being thrashed out tonight.
Before Pol.is, there will occasionally be people just on polar opposites and they refuse to sit together. But once we switch to Pol.is, that never happened again.
Audrey sees these changes driven by hacker culture as vital for the health of democracy. My last question was whether all of this that we've seen is really, truly here to stay.
Well, the V stands for virtual, but it can also stand for vulnerable, right? But I think the spirit of collaborative governance is larger than any particular experiment. And so for that, I think it is enduring and indeed inevitable. If the democratic institutions do not hold ourselves accountable to this new culture, then we risk being rendered irrelevant. The legitimacy of institutional democracy will go further down.